In this episode, we're going to be going through some questions that we get while we're in the classroom.
And how they pertain to chemical behavior, operational decision making, foundational hazmat stuff. We're talking health and exposure. Hey, Mike, you know the worst part about arriving at a hazmat scene?
Knowing that certain body parts are going to be sticking to your inner thigh on a hot summer's day.
Yeah, well, also uncertainty. You have no idea what's in the air.
Yeah, it's a lot of just assuming it's a chemical, and that just doesn't cut it, right? You need answers, and you need them fast.
And that's where the Explorer comes in. It's real-time chemical ID and quantification right in the field.
Yeah, no more of this. It's probably something bad. It's going to tell you exactly what's there and how much.
So you can set up the right control zones like an adult, and you're not going to be a rookie just guessing where to put the tape.
That means defensible, qualitative data in just seconds, which is going to make your decision-making a hell of a lot easier.
And so there's no more waiting around for an answer. It's just solid, life-saving intel.
Check out Explore and stop guessing. Go to 908devices.com. You know what stresses me out about hazmat calls?
The part where everyone just stands around and says, it smells like something.
Yeah. All the guessing. No tactics, all guessing.
Teledyne FLIR Defense builds detection tools so we stop doing that. Real sensors for real CBRNE threats.
And they've been doing it for over 30 years. They're helping us, the first responder, actually know what we're dealing with.
Hazmat, homeland security, public safety, ugly scenes, but clearer answers.
Because remember, the more you know, the smarter you'll be able to operate.
Teledyne FLIR Defense. Any threat, anywhere, without the mystery.
And as we promised, we are looking into battery solutions or solutions for battery fires. And although many companies have put their product in front of us, there's been only one noteworthy one because it actually has been extinguishing lithium-ion battery fires. It's going to work on a whole multiple classes of fires. It's going to prevent the fire from spreading. And best of all, the lithium-ion battery, it's going to keep it from reigniting.
And wait. Before any of you keyboard warriors start cap locking, asking for proof, the links are in the show notes for UL Class A and B, as well as BSI for 10 categories, including lithium-ion batteries.
Yeah, and besides those great agencies testing it, we've put it through our own high standard of field testing, which is basically our backyard, and we've been pretty impressed with the results. Yeah. Now, we always suggest that you do your own myth busting. What's really nice is it's available in a variety of different options, so it can integrate into whatever your current process is. Access more and check them out at Fire Suppression Solutions, or go ahead and click on the show notes. Hey, Jake.
Hey, buddy! This is the first one we've got to do together. I know it's inaugural.
I'm so excited by this. Why Bob is dealing with the bubonic plague.
I'm just came down. I'm coming off the bubonic plague. I don't. Obviously we're hundreds of miles apart, me and Bobby, but I can't help but think that we may have caught the same thing.
I don't know. I'm thinking so because I know somebody was in the Chicago area only a few days ago, and that's Midwest flyover country, which is where you are. So yeah, I'm blaming you for this one.
Sorry, Bob. So it seems like today we have ourselves a bit of a mailbag.
Yeah, a little bit different of a mailbag, though. Usually these mailbags come in from listener questions. These are ones that we have accumulated throughout the past, I'd say 6 to 8 months of sitting in the classroom, which gives us a little bit different spin because a lot of the classroom stuff that we get is a lot of newer technicians coming right out from operations. So they're kind of looking at questions from the I'm thinking like a child point of view. So, we some of them have kind of been answered in that thinking like a child point of view, but we're going to go through them and we can give them both the okay, you're a new person answer, and let's also give them the okay, you've got a couple of years on. Let's maybe there's a little bit of confusion in the initial teaching type of thing. Sound good? All right. All right, so the first question that we get, and we actually get this a fair amount, obviously not the exact same words, but the idea is the same. When do you trust your meters, and when should you question them?
I think about this like the biggest thing I can do to build trust in my meter is be involved in the calibration and bump testing process, right? Understanding how this meter knows what it's looking at elicits a lot of trust inside of the meter. I've had multiple times where I've been in the field where I've got a reading that doesn't seem to make sense, but the trust I have in the meter and the technology says I can't explain why it's telling me I have a flammable atmosphere, but I know that it is that way based off of my trust of the meter. And that trust comes from being involved in the calibration process and understanding the capability of the meter. And so on the flip side, obviously, when should I question them is if I don't have any involvement in that process. Now, why should I trust my life to this meter? Because that's essentially what we're doing. If we're going into a semi-unknown environment or an unknown environment, and we're saying, I'm going to wager my life on the idea that this is going to be accurate, I need to know if I wasn't involved in the process, I'm just taking for granted that somebody was, and hopefully that person's trustworthy. And so that's really where I ground my trust in these meters. And the other thing to add to this would be, if I had readings that don't make sense, and granted, like I just said, if you trust your meter, you can sometimes leapfrog over the top of that. Well, this doesn't make sense, but this must exist because I trust the meter. The far side of that coin is if this thing's telling me something that just isn't physically possible, say you have a massive displacement on your oxygen sensor, but none of your other sensors are showing anything, you either have a very odd chemical or something screwed up, right? So that's my basic, super short framework. What do you think?
That is, I would have never even come across with that perspective. So in the department that I came from, there is not a single hazmat technician that has ever calibrated a meter. We are such a large department that we actually have a company that comes in and takes over the logistics of all the calibration. I personally have never calibrated a meter. And it's really interesting that you're like, well, because I calibrate it, I trust it. And you're like, who would just trust a meter? Then I'm like, that's me. Like, I've never calibrated a meter before. So and that got me thinking, like, well, why the hell do I trust the meter? Like, you're seeing it happen. You're seeing the technology. You're seeing it change. Like, that's giving you trust in the meter. Where is my trust coming from? And I guess my trust is coming from a deep understanding of the technology. So when somebody asks me this question, I look at it as like well, how do I trust the technology? Not necessarily how do I trust the individual meter itself. So it's an interesting take on that perspective. And for me, it's knowing where the technology excels and understanding where the technology doesn't excel so that I can say in this environment, okay, I am not in a high humidity, low temperature environment. Like, I know I'm within the specs of the meter, so I don't have any reason to believe that this technology is failing due to the environment. Or I believe it should work in this instance because this meter is specifically designed to pick up this type of material, and that is what I believe that we're in. So that's a kind of cool swap on the perspectives and interpretation of the question. I'm not going to have to add your answer into my answer every time somebody asks this.
There you go. All right. In rapid order, let's move on to our next one here. So, Mikey, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see new techs make when they hit their first few real calls?
So it's not a mistake as far as like oops, I forgot the information. It's stupid things that we don't think about. Like, one of my first mistakes as a new technician was at a subway explosion, going over the air saying that we have readings of VX. When my AP4C or the AP the A2, whatever it was back then, was giving me phosphorus and sulfur. And I was like, oh my God, guys, like we've got VX, which is radio, stuff is good. But I think it's just you come out of tech class and the dots aren't connected yet, right? It's like a probie coming out of probie school, right? We give them an entire year to get off of probation because they've got to connect the dots. And I think a technician coming out just assumes that they know everything they know coming out of hazmat school, and they get on scene and they start getting bombarded with all this information. None of it really makes sense because they haven't taken the time, or they haven't yet had the experience to connect those dots. So I think mistakes happen from I didn't realize that this bit of information and this bit of information were related.
Yeah. So to compound on top of that, I think that one of the things that I see most frequently is that people are overthinking it. Right? We go through school and you learn all this information and you do all these scenarios, and all too often, simply built scenarios are like, a train into a highway carrier into a school that's built on top of an Indian burial ground or whatever. It's like, and all too often in hazmat, it's like Frank forgot to tighten the bung cap and it tipped over. And it doesn't mean that it's not a real call. There could be real danger, but the actual solution to the problem doesn't involve any like high level formulas, or it's just a matter of like identifying what the product is, making a PPE plan, solving the mitigation, and moving on with your life. It doesn't have to be outrageously elaborate thing for it to be an adequate solution that solves a real problem that's actually dangerous, but it doesn't have to be, E equals MC squared or something.
So how do you teach that in your classrooms, Jake? How do you teach that KISS concept, like that keep it simple, stupid, like where things are actually much more straightforward than we plan them out to be?
In my mind, I make it as simple as it can be until it demands that it becomes more complicated, right? If we can solve it at the simplest possible form, then let's do it there. And if we then encounter a new roadblock, we'll cover that roadblock when we get there. But I want to boil everything down to the simplest process, and because the more you overcomplicate something, the more you're prone to mistakes and confusion and all these things. The simpler it can be, the more straightforward. Hazmat innately is complicated. So we don't need to add more complications by trying to do, ninja shit inside of the hazmat world, right? It's already complicated. It's already confusing for a lot of people. Let's try to boil it down to the absolute most bare, most simple solutions.
I love this next question. This is one of my most favorite questions in the classroom because it really does show. It lets me see that a student is truly thinking, and it usually happens, a couple of days into a tech class where they turn around and they go, we've done all these chemical and physical properties. We've done all this stuff. We're looking up information, and they turn around and they go, well, wait a second. What if I don't know what the chemical is? What's your first move, and what's the actual process?
So if we don't know, if straight up we don't know what the chemical is, there's a very big difference between I don't know what the chemical is and I don't know anything about the chemical, right? So that I guess would be the first clarifying question, right? Is if we truly have an absolute unknown, now we just follow into our procedures, which is just like start checking boxes to find information. But say we do have some bit of information, we just don't have an exact identification, right? Do we know its state of matter, right? Do we know any signs or symptoms that anyone that saw this release happen, right? How long ago did it happen? What was going on to cause it to happen? All these things that aren't going to necessarily tell us exactly what it is, but it is going to probably start to build a threat profile in terms of, are we dealing with a toxic gas or a flammable gas or a liquid or a solid or all these things. Without actually identifying the product, we can do a whole, like, identifying is oftentimes completely unnecessary. We need to classify. We put something in one of those DOT hazard classes, and that might be enough to solve the problem without ever even trying to identify it in the first place.
Yeah, because really we just want to protect ourselves from a hazard, not necessarily like check the box that we identified it.
Exactly. Today's episode is brought to you by Rigaku Analytical Devices, who are the folks have been perfecting the 1064 nanometer Raman longer than some of us have even been doing hazmat.
Which is no shocking that their 4th generation hand analyzer just came out, the Icon X, built specifically for real-world hazmat teams to deal with everyday things that we come across, like dirty powders, mixed materials, dyes, colors, things that make other instruments go into temper tantrums.
And the 1064 nanometer laser means reduced fluorescence, so you get fast, reliable chemical ID in under 1 minute, instead of staring at a blank screen wondering what the hell went wrong.
And this isn't just like a change to the algorithm. It's an entirely new platform. It's its own new toolbox. It's supporting new accessories, including standoff analyzation, so you can get answers without getting too close.
If you want an analyzer that's evolving right alongside the hazmat world, check out Rigaku's newest Raman at rigakuanalytical.com. You know what I love about the city?
Telling whether somebody's homeless or hipster.
No. Actually, it's my new favorite e-scooter gang.
Yes, because nothing screams hazmat like a moped with a battery that's about to go nuclear.
And, and that's where Obexion FR saves the day.
Yeah, lightweight, mobile-friendly, and designed for the first responder, because the last thing we need is extra weight when things start heating up.
And it's third-party tested to lower toxic gases below IDLH levels.
So you could actually be a little bit more comfortable breathing while putting out that scooter fire.
And if you need more Obexion FR, it comes by the pallet and certified polydrum kits.
Which is great when you're like, holy crap, we're going to need a lot of this.
So protect your team and your lungs. And to learn more, go to hazmatguys.dgo.com. That's the Hazmat Guys, or hazmatguys.dgo.com. And we're back. So let's keep going. So if you're going to make a decision about an incident, what are some of the factors that come in if you're going to start thinking about going offensive versus defensive? Is it cut and dry, or is it obviously, I would imagine, situational? But what are some of the things that come to your mind?
I think it's pretty cut and dry. I think the line between offensive techniques and defensive techniques are getting intimate with the product. And the moment you have to get intimate with the product, the moment the product is going to get all over you, or you have to somehow be involved in the plume or in that immediate area, I think you're looking at offensive techniques. If you can do whatever it is that you can do outside of touching the product, outside of being around, I think you're fine going defensive. Now, I believe that line is, I now have to touch the product.
Okay. So let's add one more layer. For those of us loyal to the club, what about the non-intervention option?
Well, okay. I would classify non-intervention as an offensive technique, right? So, and here's my reason why. Even though you're not touching it, even though you're not doing anything, it requires the knowledge and training of a hazardous materials technician to be able to make the determination that the best option is to do nothing. Without that training, without that deep understanding of chemical physical properties, without the ability to understand the product, the container, the environment, and do behavioral predictions, you have no business turning around saying non-intervention is the best way to go.
I like that. I like that. It makes me seem even smarter if I decide to do nothing. I love that, right?
That is why I'm a non-intervention specialist, because I can make doing nothing seem special.
Amen to that. I love it.
All right. How do you balance speed versus safety when there's a victim involved?
This is something I'm a little bit passionate about inside the hazmat world, because, all too often in hazmat, everyone goes, slam on the brakes, right? There's hazmat goes slow and they write themselves a prescription to be able to like be lackadaisical when they arrive on scene. And the
Giving away all my tricks.
exactly. But the reality is that like as members of the fire service or even other agencies that work in hazmat, your number one thing that you're accountable to is life safety, right? So we have to be willing to work inside that framework, even when the threat is different. It might not be a house fire or a crazy guy with a gun, but the thing that we're combating is this chemical harm or this chemical danger, and we have to be willing to face the danger in some regard when victim safety is on the line. And so how do we make that balance? We hopefully have the training leading up to those moments so that we can make wise, informed decisions when they come up, right? With that, we have to be aware of the physical and chemical properties. We have to be aware of the relative toxicity or risk. Obviously, we say we risk a lot to save a lot. To be able to make that decision, you have to have some level of a risk profile and a benefit profile, which is, is it likely that there are victims involved? Do we have a report that there's victims? Is it just we suspect, or are we just doing kind of a broad area life safety sweep? But all these things, the same way that they would with a fire, come in and kind of get mashed up in that, and we say, well, what is the proposed benefit? And like I said, I think all too often inside the hazmat space, people are writing themselves a prescription to be lazy and not prioritize life safety the same way they would on the fire side. And I think that's a shame. I think we should work to be comfortable enough inside of hazardous materials environments that we can have a similar quote unquote aggressive stance like we do on the fire service side. What would you say to that?
So I agree with you 1,000%. And one of the things that I often reflect back on for them, because again, a lot of our technicians are coming through the fire service, right? I probably wouldn't do this if we were in industry, because they would probably look at me like, what do you mean you're going to go into a fire? But if I asked them, I go, what kind of question would that be? Like if you were, say, in the firehouse and you were asking guys and you were like, how do you balance speed versus safety with a victim on the second floor above the fire with no stretched hose line? Like how do you balance that speed and safety without the protection of a hose line? And if your answer is I would go in and get the victim, and I turn around and go, oh, so you're willing to get burnt to grab a kid? And they're like, yeah, of course. I said, okay, you're willing to go to the hospital and go through the burn center and do the skin grafts. Like all those things are things that you're good with in order to grab somebody from the floor above. Yes. Okay. Well, how does that change from somebody that's in, an acid spill or some kind of chemical, or they're deep in an ammonia facility? I was like, if you're willing to put yourself in danger in this situation, what is the difference? And oftentimes they think about it, and once they realize that there is no difference, it starts to make sense to them how speed and safety, we view it just in really very little difference as we would grabbing a victim in a fire.
But the reason I think for this is that generally the average firefighter is relatively comfortable with doing a primary search and things like that. But the average person that claims to be a hazmat tech probably doesn't have the same level of comfortability. And so that is another reason why we have to prioritize training inside of our teams so that they can have that comfortability to make the grab and do the quote unquote aggressive tactic that is the expectation of them, but all too often we find ourselves falling short.
I agree.